What's the most strangely unique punishment you ever received as a kid? How bad was it? My sisters and I would have to memorize passages from Shakespeare together. It was horrible to be fighting and then sit together for half an hour or more memorizing and reciting until my dad returned. One wrong word and he'd leave us for a while. Probably the worst part is it made me hate Shakespeare. My best friend and I snuck out and walked to the nearby convenience store late at night in 6th grade. My father made me write a 20-page research paper on Watergate. I have no idea why he chose the topic, but the knowledge has come in handy many times in my life. I had to kneel facing a wall while pulling my ears, and if my ears weren't red enough when they came to check on me, then I had to stay there even longer. In high school, my friend got caught smoking weed by his mom. His punishment was that he had to tell his 95-year-old strictly religious great-grandmother, who thinks weed is just as bad as heroin. My parents would make my older brother and sister choose one of the encyclopedias, turn to a random page, and start copying everything down until my parents told them to stop. My dad made us all go to the back of a 45-minute line at the theme park because I was being impatient and bratty. Would do similar things. If anyone complained about dinner or how long it took to cook, they would eat after everyone else. Forced to smell dog breath. Because if we have to deal with the filth from your mouth, you have to deal with the filth from its mouth. It sounds funny. And it is funny looking back on it. But good God, it was not funny then. I begged for almost anything else. When I was 4, my mother was fed up with my stubborn refusal to eat my sandwich at lunch one day. She picked it up, separated the 2 slices, and stuck it to my face. There was a moment of complete silence as I stopped whining and evaluated what she'd done. After that, we were both too collapsed with laughter to be mad at each other. What are you? An idiot sandwich. My sister and I were arguing over some cheap plastic recorder, the musical kind. Like a clarinet from hell for overtired parents. I wanted it because she wanted it. She wanted it because I wanted it. In the end, my dad walked up to us and settled it by breaking the recorder in half and handing us each a piece. We both learned a valuable lesson that day, I think. Note: I love my dad more than anything. And I definitely had a wonderful childhood. Your dad had probably been looking for an excuse to break that recorder for a while. When I was 5 or 6, deaf old enough to know better, I bit my older sister directly on the stomach. Left top and bottom teeth imprints. It wasn't something minor. Mum grabbed a dog collar and leash, then tied me to a doorknob for several hours. If you act like a dog, you get treated like a dog. I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. I threw a ton of glitter on my brother when he was in the bathtub. My parents bought a giant bag of glitter and dumped it on my bed. They made me count it and would not give me my phone or laptop back until I did. In Catholic school, a nun made me go out back in the convent and cut her grass with a pair of scissors. My thumbs were bruised for a week and hurt for days. How the FCK did they expect you to count glitter? Even better, what kept you from lying? It's not like they would count it and prove you wrong. Not my punishment, but my brother's. He was in kindergarten and often got physical with other kids by pushing them and whatnot. After being told a couple times by the teacher, my dad had enough. When my brother and I got home from school, he asked my brother to get his 3 favorite Game Boy games. I went upstairs as I suspected something terrible was about to happen. My mom and dad took my brother out to the garage, gave him a hammer, and told him to smash the games to bits. I could hear my brother screaming bloody murder and my dad yelling back to swing the hammer. After a couple seconds and screams, I heard a ping as the hammer bounced off the plastic game laying on the concrete. Then another and yet another. I was absolutely petrified as I could hear my brother screaming in horror. He never lashed out again, and I made damn sure not to misbehave as it mentally scarred me too just from hearing it. A friend of mine recently told me that his mom used to have him kneel on uncooked rice when he did something wrong. Sounds miserable if you ask me. Very popular in old Catholic schools. Can cause permanent nerve damage. Hurts a bunch. My parents had to get creative. The most unique for me was sleeping on a couch in our sunroom that was shared by our beagle. And not being allowed to read anything. I was, and am, big into reading. You would be surprised at the sudden increase of homework assignments I did that required reading fiction. I loved reading as a kid. My father realized sending me to my room wasn't a punishment. My father is an English professor. He got good. After a while. My punishment wasn't go to my room. It was watch C-SPAN. I would have to watch politics for hours. And we would talk about it. I was one of the few, if only 12-year-olds who could talk about the Senate. The House. Who is trying to push through what? As a grown-up now. I'm thankful. As a kid. I was stunned. How did he come up with something so anti-useful? Once I remember as a kid my mate and I were playing with fire in the council domain. The wind kicked up and it blew into the long grass. Our house was across the road from the domain and my mate and I ran home. We had our faces pressed against the window watching the fire and the fire brigade turn up. My dad asked us if we had lit the fire. We both said no. He knew we had. He took me into the shed and put some newspaper down on the ground and told me to stand on it. He said, "If you lie, your feet will sweat and I will be able to see your footprints on the newspaper." He asked me the question again. "Did you light the fire, boy?" "Yes." SSSS. SSS. F Ken got me good. Can't remember what the punishment was but it was proper cold shower and loss of TV or something. I used to tell my kids their ears would turn red if they were lying. They would cover their ears every time they lied. When I was a kid and at my grandparents' place, whenever I was sick I had to swallow a tablespoonful of whiskey. Made me throw up every time. It didn't matter what the medical problem was. I got a tablespoon of whiskey. Poison ivy? Whiskey. Flu? Whiskey. Food poisoning? Whiskey. Fell out of a tree and scrapped myself up real bad? Whiskey. I think I was punished for being weak. There was no winning. If grandma or grandpa suspected that I wasn't feeling 100%, they'd straight out ask me what was wrong. And I had to say something or risk worse punishments. It's like that one time I sprained my shoulder and ended up with a doctor's fingers up my ass. When my dad was a teenager, if he didn't clean his room when his mother told him to, she would empty the contents of his room onto the front lawn for him to discover when he would get home from school. I have always loved music. When CDs were still relevant. iPods were barely known. Pandora and Spotify didn't exist. The time when it was Napster versus Lemua. My mother took all my music away for a month. On the third week, she gave me one CD back. Deftones' White Pony. After she gave everything back, I got to rediscover all my favorites. It was an interesting punishment and the best reward for enduring. Not sure how unique it was, but we would always be grounded from our rooms not to our rooms. It was the worst. You don't realize how much is in your room until you aren't allowed to go in it. My parents didn't know what to do with me BC I was being a prick. So they took literally everything out of my room including my bed. It was weird and I remember sitting in the corner with my teddy. I was hiding it so they wouldn't take that too. I was the firstborn so they've learned. In elementary school we had this one really strict teacher that would make us T-pose in the back of the room if we were being disruptive. Every one of us scoffed at the idea until about a minute in and your arms are killing you. Very effective punishment. In my birth family the only punishment other than being spanked with a hairbrush was the silent treatment and shunning. And it was terrible. Because we were never told what we had done wrong. Or even what the rules were. We would have to silently guess what rule we had broken. There was no prize for guessing right. And the silent treatment could go on for days or longer. It was bad because it made me really jumpy. Made it hard for me to trust people. And because I then had to teach myself how to speak up instead of sulking to communicate. Silent treatment is messed up. My girlfriend gets really anxious when I'm quiet because people always expressed anger in her family through silence. I created a dummy and put it in my bed. Then snuck out the window. When I got home the dummy was still there. I started dancing and celebrating. Then the dummy popped up. It was my dad. Nearly shat myself. Then he made me dig up the septic tank the next morning. Still the scare was what got me. I was a 16-year-old girl. We had 4 cats. It was my job to care for them because I wanted them. But I'd often forget to clean the litter boxes. And make someone else do it. Because it stunk and it was gross. Especially when one of the cats was sick. I'd been warned about it a couple times. But kept doing it. One day when I was at school. My mom moved all the litter boxes into my bedroom. She replaced the litter with the kind that doesn't reduce odor at all. She specifically told me I was not allowed to open windows and I had to sleep in there, couldn't go sleep on the couch. Oh my god. It doesn't sound like much but it was so bad. I'd rather be spanked. It lasted for a week before she let me move them back out into the laundry room again. Swallowing a tablespoonful of Tabasco sauce. Standing in the corner for 2 hours with a paper bag over my head. Being allowed to eat only mashed potatoes with cod liver oil mixed in. When I was younger and I swore, my mom would put a pickled jalapeno in my mouth and make me stand in the corner. If I swallowed the jalapeno she would make me eat the entire jar. She also had the tendency to trash my room and make me clean it. Like, flip the mattresses, drawers, all the closet shelving, everything. So then I'd clean it and she would promptly reshed my room and make me clean it again. Rinse repeat 3 or 4 times. I'd be dehydrated from crying and still to this day I never really understood why she did it. I'm still bitter enough about it that if I asked today, I'd probably cry. That's like. I've never heard of anyone else being punished by being forced to put their nose on the wall. For what seemed like an eternity. I'd rather take an ass whooping any day. My mom made me write I will not talk back to my mom. I believe it was 500 times. I couldn't write the sentence one word at a time, making columns with the words to get it done fast. She made me write the full sentence out one at a time. After I was done I gave it to her. She looked the papers over and tore them up in front of me. My mom was always taking my books away because I'd read instead of doing my homework. Also my mom would go through the trash and punish me based on what I ate. In middle school my parents took all my makeup away from me because I hated leaving the house without it. I got a C in math in 8th grade and there was nothing left to take away, so my parents decided I would move in with my dad and go to a different high school than all my friends as a punishment. I'm 22 and have been paying my own phone bill for 4 years, but my mom still tries to take my phone away from me as she feels like I'm on it too much. Bro, you need to move TF out. When I was a kid, anytime my grandfather heard me say I was bored he'd make me read the newspaper next to him. After an hour or so of that I would no longer be bored. I miss him every time I see a newspaper. I desperately wanted to order WrestleMania. I was a massive Hulk Hogan fan. Well, I was acting like a little shitty and wouldn't stop. So, my dad ordered the WrestleMania pay-per-view. He sat in the living room and watched it and made me sit in the other room where I could just barely hear it but couldn't see it. He watched the whole damn thing and didn't let me move or ever see the screen. It was just effing brutal. Edit. Lots of softies in here saying this is bad parenting. Calm down. Dad gave me the chance to be better. I didn't listen. I had this shitty coming. I don't think I got any unique punishments. Just punishments that were far harsher in comparison to my crime. My brother on the other hand. He used to have skid marks in his undies and my mom was grossed out tired of cleaning them. So she took all his dirty underwear one day and made him wash every single one in the toilet. There's also a lot of casual outright child abuse already in this thread. WTF. There's also a lot of casual outright child abuse already in this thread. WTF. Half the sh*t in this thread would give CPS a heart attack, but here we are. My little brother and I got into a fight at school. Our dad bought some grout cleaner and found old toothbrushes and made us scrub the grout in the room the dogs slept in. Jokes on him, we had already made up and had a great time not doing homework or yard work. Though we were sore the next day. Edit. Mum always told us not to use too much ketchup because we always ended wasting a lot. One day I went overboard with the ketchup. Again. And she made me eat all the ketchup I didn't use with a spoon. I had my bedroom door taken away because I kept locking it. I experienced abuse as a kid from a few different adults, but the most f***ed up punishment were called snow baths. We lived in northern Michigan where it gets really cold and the snow is deep. And me and my sister acted up. We were made to strip naked and go outside and roll around in the snow for a few minutes until we were covered. This was in the 70s and I was between 7 and 9 years old and my sister is younger. Amazed I turned out without being a complete head case. Edit. Without turning this into a therapy session. This was only one thing that was happening to me and my sister as far as abuse. While I understand the health benefits, love the people who commented on their cultures, when combined with the other abuse. It was traumatic. To say the least. My father heard about using hot peppers as punishment instead of spanking. And he'd make me bite into it and hold it in my mouth, and I remember just crying and crying at the bathroom sink trying to wash it out. Aloneness wasn't terrible. But now I can't stand eating anything spicy. I honestly don't understand what other people find enjoyable about it. It's just degrees of pain to me. Like, yeah, that sauce is only mildly painful compared to a sauce that's super painful. So I can force it down. But I'd like it more if it wasn't painful at all. Parents would lock the computer with a password that required me to go to the library and research random bits of information. Such as, the password is the capital of Kazakhstan. It mainly made me waste hours of each day before I could even do my homework. I don't remember any of the passwords they made me look up. My dad was extremely abusive. My mom was the gentlest soul. She never punished us and we loved her. Her form of punishment was just talking to us and telling us what we should do instead and why. And it worked. Anyways, once she told me to stand in the corner. I was probably 8. This woman had never punished me in my life. So I was shocked. I obeyed but started to cry in the corner. She felt so badly that she came over and held me and said, "It's okay. I love you and I don't want you to be sad. I'll stand with you." I stood my 5 minutes with her at my side. Fell even more in love with my angel mother. And never disobeyed her again. Bro. This was my first gold ever. You're amazing. This is the best Christmas present ever. Literally jumped for joy. I loved gardening as a kid. But I could not control the hose as I was just 6 or 7. So I splashed some windows on accident that my mom just cleaned. So she wrapped the garden hose around my neck like a noose and put on the water. Almost strangled me to death and I had neck pains for weeks. Edit. Yeah, it's mistreatment. I never said that was a good thing my mom did. My mom used to take away my CDs. So I couldn't use my portable CD player. As an emo teenager who would angst out for hours to My Chemical Romance. This was the worst kind of punishment. I have a couple. Because I was short, at the age of 8. My guardian told me that I needed to grow taller, but since I couldn't BC I don't think I can grow taller just by thinking about it. She made me jump every day and reach for the door frame. She justified it because NBA players are tall. And they jump. So if I jumped, and pretend to dunk a basketball, I will grow taller. I also took piano lessons. I would practice for 2 hours a day. Every day. When I would mess up on one song, note-wise or speed-wise, I'd have to play 2 more times. One time it added up to the point that I needed to play the piece over 200 times. I refused to spend my whole day playing it. So my guardian took my piano book and locked me outside of the house for an hour. This one might be common. But whenever they didn't like my behavior or my actions in general, they'd confiscate all of my electronics and turn off the Wi-Fi. That one hurt the most.